About Carter, who came before Reagan?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's an idiot. But he's an idiot. He was an idiot. Everybody thought he was an idiot.
Why?
Because first of all, you couldn't understand when he spoke because he mumbled. He never opened his mouth, and he had that southern accent. He had no presence. And his speeches would get boring after like 30 seconds. And I think he meant well, but it all seemed to us again at 17, if this is the smartest guy we can find to run our country, boy, are we in trouble. And that's how he felt. And I don't think it didn't seem like he accomplished much. Inflation skyrocketed. People were paying huge interest rates. We called him the peanut farmer.
Yeah.
And he had a really defunct brother who was always getting into trouble and always in the media. And Rosalind was sweet. They were sweet people, but they weren't strong. They had no presence. They had no dynamics about them, and I'm not quite sure why they were elected.
You were against nuclear power?
Uh-huh. All of us kids were against nuclear energy.
Why?
Because it seemed really dangerous to us, and it didn't seem like we knew enough about it, and it didn't seem worth the risk, because our minds went back to Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and all we could picture was that mushroom cloud and destroying all these people and seeing the aftermath of what could happen. So the risk was not worth the reward. We were all convinced that there was another way of getting good energy without causing such potential risk to the environment, to neighbors, to families, to communities, to vast areas. And then there was no good answer. I remember this specifically. There was no good answer as to what to do with the waste. And I remember that all vividly. There was all this big discussion of what do you do with the nuclear waste? Well, you put it in safe containers and you bury it, 500 feet beneath the Earth's surface. Well, that's not good for the Earth. It's how much of that waste can you accumulate, and that's just going to sit there. And what happens if it leaks? And you got to drink the water, and that's going to contaminate the well. So it was a huge environmental thing, and overall, it just didn't seem worth the risk. And nobody was into green energy. Nobody. They called us greenies. They still do. Nobody wanted an alternative natural source, and there were lots of people who came up with those ideas, but the big, huge corporations squelched their ideas, because that's the first person you would go to because you wanted to sell your idea, because they had the money to market it and back it and finance it and get it through. So they would buy it from you and then they'd bury it because it would kill their business.
Yeah. They
had no interest in marketing it and seeing it go forward. And that still happens today with oil and gas. That's why we're so far behind.
You said you remembered the Iran hostage crisis?
I just remember it vaguely. I remember being afraid of everybody who lived overseas. Anybody that didn't speak English and had a Middle Eastern accent, we were afraid of. Well, because I remember the Olympics, the Olympians being shot at,
yeah,
and killed and taken hostage, and that was a mess. That was terrible. I remember Reagan bringing the whole country together. We were so divided and at such unrest, and we felt really fragmented, and we didn't feel like a strong country. And he brought American pride and proud to be an American, and that whole feeling of ingenuity and creativity and imagination and the leader of the world feeling back to America. Before that, it had totally disappeared. There was no American pride. There was no American unity. It was us against the Russians, and it was us against Iran, and just before that it was the 60s and civil unrest, and there was just so much unrest. We were like at civil war, and Reagan was like this real strong father figure and brought the entire country back together, and we all felt unified. It was a great time when he was president.
Do you remember Reaganomics?
I remember the term, and I remember him saying it would take a long time. And you asked me about it cut the taxes for the rich. Well, when you cut the taxes for the rich, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to spend more money. But when Clinton came into power, he's a Democrat, and all of a sudden the spending began. And that's when the economy started being boosted. And people feel that, the Republicans feel that Reaganomics kicked in when Clinton became president, because it was going to take a long time to get to that point. It wasn't an overnight fix. And the Democrats don't believe that. The Democrats believe, well, they don't believe in Reaganomics at all. They think the whole thing was just to make the rich richer.
Right.
Well, you can cut taxes, but you can't force people to spend money.
Do you remember Star Wars?
Yeah, my next door neighbor was asked, you know the old lady I take to lunch all the time?
Yeah.
Henriette Thomas?
Yeah.
Her husband, he looks like a mad professor. He looked like Einstein. Totally ragged white hair, always doing one of these numbers, you know, never looking at you in the face, always thinking and always talking. And he was what we call rocket scientist. He was a genius. And Reagan asked him to work on Star Wars. He worked on it for quite a while. And I thought it was a great idea, because Star Wars was a huge defense program where if anybody went to nuke our country and send missiles overseas to destroy the country, there would be a system in place that would take out those weapons before they even hit American territory.
Right.
And literally it would be a war in the sky. But it was a great concept. It was a great idea, and we had the capability for it. It was just going to cost a lot of money, but it was a total defense system. In most people's minds, it was far more productive than sending a man to the moon. Defending our country and keeping us safe was far more, it was a better way to spend money. So you send a guy to the moon. We're not going to live on the moon anytime soon.
So, do you remember the ERA?
I remember the fight for equal rights amendments, for equal rights.
Who was that lady?
Gloria Steinem. What did I say they called us? Women's Lib. Women's Lib was all over the news. Drove me crazy because it was so unfair. They were putting us in a really negative light, and all we wanted was equal pay for the same job. If we have the same brains and the same education and the same grades and the same knowledge, why don't we get paid the same? Because we're a woman, and that's not fair. She was outspoken. She was not feminine, so then all of those women that sided with her became feminists. And it was really portrayed negatively. There weren't a lot of women in the media, so we were all being portrayed by the male media as negative. They didn't really give a whole lot of credence to it, but it was such a strong movement because it just made sense. And she was one of the first ones, and she relied on her history, like all the women who fought for the right to vote, the suffragette. You know, it takes a really strong female personality to go against men. Because if men hold the power, they can do a lot of damage, especially way back then when we were fighting for the right to vote. That's why we're so far behind.